I think moving on, the film we've just seen, as I said, I feel is a very powerful reminder of the tragedy and our responsibilities to deliver higher standards. So how are we, as an industry, the collective we, going to help the Charlotte Dowses of the world, the lady you saw who'd learned about EWS forms, perhaps as many of us here have, and how are we going to help many others like her and help them regain confidence and trust in designers and contractors? So whilst you think about your questions, and do raise your hands if you have a question, and we can come to you. Just to start things off, during the film we heard a lot about culture and how we must change. We also heard about workmanship. David, in your position, how do you think that the building safety bill could make a difference?
Well, I think I mentioned in the film that it starts from the top. So I think if clients understand their responsibilities and feel that responsibility, then they will start to make sure that the people they employ on the project also understand their responsibilities and start to think about, should we be doing this? I think one of the lessons we've got from Grenfell is, if only people had said, okay, we can do this, but should we be doing this? We might have had a different outcome. So I guess it's, you focus upon, are we doing the right thing? Are we building something that is going to be compliant with regulations? Is it going to be, are we going to select contractors and designers who are both competent and able to evidence that competence, so that actually the thing you put in for planning is the thing that is actually delivered? That's really, really important, because 90% of people spend 90% of their time inside a building. So the physical and mental well-being of everybody is massively impacted. So why do we accept buildings that don't meet standards? It's not a difficult thing to do, is it? You put in planning application, meet the standard, prove you've met the standard, and actually it will have huge societal benefits. And I think if it comes from the top down, you drive a better culture in the industry, one of compliance rather than what can I get away with.
So should culture become second nature?
Well, of course. Yeah, culture trumps strategy every time, doesn't it?
Certainly we've got to change. Just moving on, we also heard some concerns about around quality and the need for better skills. We touched on some training, making sure that those installers are fully qualified, those designers are fully qualified, that they understand what they're installing. John, just turning to you, sort of your experience, you know, we have CSC cards, the skills cards, we've got the CITB, we've got BISA, and we have REBA, and many other organisations that advocate sort of better training and continuous improvement. You know, if we're going to overcome these challenges, where do you think we should start to make improvements?
I think there's many ways we can, but 2 points I'd like to bring to your attention really is, first of all, the cladding now is a massive part of any structure. With the demise of brickwork, most buildings are clad with some type of metal or aluminium or whatever. The trouble is there's no formal training courses for the installation of cladding. I think what needs to happen really is that needs to change with the CITB, and we need to start bringing young people in at grassroots and training them straight from school. That would give more education and hopefully a better standard of installation later on. But secondly, we need to educate main contractors and developers, because unfortunately price is still king within the industry. They don't seem to realise that maybe paying a bit more will get them a bigger contractor, someone with in-house training, someone with better QA, and also accountability and responsibility if anything goes wrong in years to come. So I think training of young people, and also the main contractors realising that they need to pay for a better standard of installation will make the industry and the cladding installation far better.
So on projects at the start, we talk about apprentices, we talk about developing skills throughout the supply chain. Where there are specific systems, and you talked in the film about the some of the new systems need to be fully tested. How do you think people should be trained on project specifics at the start of a contract, so that everybody is aware of their roles and responsibilities and expectations?
What we as a company we try and do is, if we've got a bespoke system that we're fixing on a building, it's not only ourselves, our installers, but it's also the main contractor who needs to be aware of how we're going to do it, so they can check our QA at certain hold points throughout the installation. So we try and get a seminar with everybody involved on the project, with the manufacturer, so that we can all be aware of the do's and the don'ts, and when we need a hold point, when we need to be checked, when someone needs to come photograph it before we put the covering layer over. So yeah, I think it's really accountability throughout the process.
And I think things like that can only again be another positive step forward if we all learn from that.
Without doubt.
Just to make sure there are still opportunities to ask questions, we'll come for over there. If I can reach down, over on the right. We'll come. I'll just ask one question for a moment, then we'll come to you. Could I turn to Peter? Actually, one of the things I've I've seen today is we're seeing and hearing a lot more about modern methods of construction. What modern methods of construction are may vary where you are, but certainly when you look around the hall, it's a common theme. What as a manufacturer and supplier, what role do you think could off-site fabrication have, and where could it be used to perhaps increase safety standards as well as the overall build quality?
Well, I will answer that question, but could I just go first of all back to a point that John made, which I find among the many points he made is highly relevant. Insofar as the subject of creditworthiness is concerned, because we as a company deal with extremely high-end, high-tested quality materials, and yet there is no barrier to who could come along and fix it. And we find that the creditworthiness of some of the people appointed by main contractors to fix this material, and let's face it, the main contractors want it fixed properly. The whole subject of credit and another point John made in the film is, will that firm be around in 2 years' time? Well, in the case of my company, and certainly his, if you've been around for 20-odd years, there's a very good chance that next year and thereafter you'll still be around. So I think the drum for creditworthiness among subcontractors should be banged long and loud and unceasingly. Now, just coming back to your point about the off-site fabrication. Now, I don't think anybody here in this audience will have been unaware of the importance that the industry for the last 5, 6, 7 years has been switching to off-site manufacturing. You know, the de-skilling on site, and the more roles that can be fulfilled inside a warm, dry factory with the building loaded onto a vehicle and sent to site. Now that has gained prominence. In fact, so many government contracts, I'm told, these days depend on a large percentage of that particular project being off-site construction. Now, VIVALDA operates a lot of machinery cutting high specification cladding to very close tolerances. And that is a service we offer initially, because it makes it easier to fix on site. It's easier to take off the pallet. Each panel is cut to the customer's bespoke requirement. It is labelled and therefore can be immediately fitted onto the rails. Now, that speed of fixing is one advantage of the off-site fabrication service that my company offers. But of course it goes wider than that. It isn't just the speed, it's the fact that all dust extraction takes place in our factories. It means that sites these days, which are very tight for space, don't have to have machining going on whilst dust being created, which in itself is a health hazard. The decorators aren't best pleased when you've got dust floating around. All these things to bear in mind. The health and safety. The wastage, because all the panels that we cut are put through a computer program to make sure that the amount of wastage is reduced to the very, very bare minimum. Nobody wants to pay for panels that are going into landfill. Landfill, it's more environmentally friendly the less we put into it. So there's a variety of reasons why off-site fabrication is becoming popular. And we don't see the need to keep it isolated to cladding. Most buildings these days require component parts. My company is geared up to supply them. Now, yeah, you can say, I'm sitting here promoting my company. Well, of course I am. But at the same time, we produce a record of what has been produced and delivered to site. And we saw on the documentary the golden thread. Now, the documents that we provide can go into the golden thread so that if ever the requirement came about in the years to come, what was this product, what was what was delivered, what sizes were delivered, and so forth, it is all there. Now, I used an analogy in the documentary that the material, the aluminium supplied by our Scottish company, MSP, in Scotland, is solid grade. There's nothing to catch fire because essentially, it's the same material they make aeroplanes out of. Now, you would never ring Boeing and say, what's behind these panels? And they would say, I've no idea, mate. Somebody fixed it, they've gone bust, and your guess is as good as mine. Well, we take, given the fact that a lot of buildings these days, a lot of high-rise, house more people than any jet airliner does, the onus is to get things right. We need to know what that building was made of. And the products that we supply can go into a file where everybody can be aware of what went into the building at the time it was constructed, and where the book should stop should questions need to be asked.
So just to capture that, so in terms of quality and in terms of safety, both for on-site workers and for those people who will ultimately occupy and use those buildings, it's one option to move things forward, to be able to fully document everything that is part of the building process.
You're absolutely right. And also, I used the word de-skilling when I first started talking. Now, if we can de-skill to the point where we don't need highly qualified carpenters who can cut within 0.5 millimetre, if we can de-skill to the point where we don't need dust extraction on site and all that kind of requirement, and concentrate the skills on fitting the cladding in accordance with the specification, then de-skilling the trades can be focused on skilling up the really important aspect, which is getting the fitting right. Now, this documentary is called Behind the Facade because, as John, who's got far more experience than me, of taking a panel off and revealing the horrors that go underneath it. Who knows what goes on behind the facade? But with more skills, more training in the actual fitting, not the production or the cutting, but the fitting of these components, then we can all, those who live in these type of buildings, can sleep soundly at night.
So that's one of the sort of processes of change that's going to help us move forward.
Most certainly.
So can we just come to our first question? And there is still room for more, so I would encourage you to put your hands up. If you say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is.
Hello, thank you very much. Firstly, thank you for the movie, and thanks to the panel for taking the time to be here with us today. My name is Rosalie Riklova. I'm the director and co-founder of Thermulon. We're a startup working on novel advanced materials for construction. And my question is, do you think we can solve the cladding crisis with existing materials already available in the market, or do we need new ones? And I would love to hear, especially from Peter and John, if that's at all possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the question and showing such an interest. The real tragedy of Grenfell was that the materials used were never intended for that purpose. And it's easy for the outsider to believe that what I'm talking about here is all post-2017. Could I just say that the materials my company supplies were available well before 2017. The reason why safe materials weren't on Grenfell and dodgy materials were comes down to price. That's basically what it is. And my company has lost many orders we thought were firm specifications because, as it turned out in value engineering, that our materials were too expensive. Now, could we reduce our prices by supplying a different material? Well, in all honesty and in all conscience, no. That material which you originally came to us for was the right material for the job. If you want one that won't do the job, we want nothing to do with it. And that is the story of Grenfell. So in summary to your question, there are some damn good materials out there and some perfectly good suppliers with an honourable reputation and honourable intent. So I can't foresee a magic bullet where something will come along and completely transform what goes on at the moment.
Just to lead on from that, I think your question was, do we need other systems? The fact is, I think we're going to need something because there's a glut of buildings, as I said in the film, over 2,000 that need replacing. The funding from the government has been delayed. It still hasn't come through. And what we're finding is that all these buildings are probably going to go at once. And there won't be, leading times on materials within the construction industry have gone out threefold already in the last 6 or 8 months. And the problem's going to be, if all these buildings come online virtually the same time, I don't think there will be the supply from the raw material to actually service all these buildings. So how we get over that, I honestly don't know.
David, have you got anything to add for that?
I have no idea, sorry. Cladding is another bit for me.
Thank you. There is still time for questions. We've got one more over there. If I just ask one more and then we'll come to you. We've heard a lot about the word responsibility today, and it's been mentioned quite often. Just going back to the building safety bill, do you think this could encourage the supply chain to sort of call out product choice, wrong product choice? Peter, you've touched on it. John, you've touched on it. And the quality of workmanship. I'm just wondering, could the building safety bill lead to greater bureaucracy and no acceptance of responsibility? Does anybody have a view?
No, I don't think so. I think it will lead to an improvement. The points we've been making earlier, I think there's still a culture that the fact you can't do a job doesn't stop you winning a job. We see that over and over again. When we were involved in dry lining, Adrian, the number one call into the technical line usually involved, what? There's a British standard for this? And that's what they did day in, day out. So, there's a culture of incompetence is the right word, but no one would recognize it as such, and that has to change. Will people feel more responsible? I think Dame Judith Hackett said once people get their collars felt, then that will start to find its way down. If we look at the industry as a whole, though, there are probably the people in this room who are engaged have already got it. And then there are people who will get it when it becomes an imperative. They have no choice because they won't have any work. And then there will be, 5-10% who have no intention of getting it and never will get it because they don't intend to get it. And those are the people we need to drive out of the industry through generally higher standards. And as I said before, it's about evidencing your competence and compliance at the end of a project.
It's a big change for everybody in the supply chain. So just coming over to you, sir, for your question.
Hello, thank you very much. It was enlightening, very clear to get a great message across on what happened. I'm James from Pro Composite Solutions. I'm Managing Director and worked closely with VIVALDA in finding solutions and good products to a lot of our fabrication clients in the market. One of the things that striked me, and my question relates somehow to Brexit really, was the change in legislation and reaction that happened after Grenfell. At the time, aluminium composite materials were rated on BBA by BS 476, level 1, level 0. At the time, I was working for a manufacturer of aluminium composite. We were called into the DCLG, now the MHCLG, to consult and advise on what actually went wrong, what products were right, which ones were wrong. We know that A-class is important. Now that we've left the UK, Europe, and we're standing alone, we no longer have BS 476. We're complying to the European norm of EN 13501. My question is, do we continue to lead the way and work alongside our European partners to EN 13501, A, B, C class and so forth? Or do you think this will need to change again to work purely for the UK market?
Ooh, interesting one.
That's yours, up, Peter.
If I may jump in on that one, given that, regrettably, that's the way it is, I think my comment about this is that everything we sell, we buy in from the EU. We don't sell so much as a screw that's been manufactured in this country. So, as I say, that's a regrettable situation, but that's where we are. Now, I think we'd be unwise, given that our suppliers are on Europe, on the continental Europe, and in the EU, to maintain parity with that one. And I think we'd be foolish to sort of set off on our own, unless it was without any shadow of a doubt a superior testing regime. But I can't see that happening.
Completely agree. I think France, Germany, Scandinavia, all working to those standards have proved that if they are complied to, we can remain safe. And,
yes. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got one more question over there. Whilst we move the microphone, just going back to the building safety bill, it's for buildings over 18 metres. Should it be any, do you think it should be any lower than 18 metres or 10 metres or lower than that?
I think it will eventually be all buildings. I can't see how you'll have two systems operating for a very long period of time, and I guess they'll just bring more and more buildings in.
Sweep them up.
I think eventually, yes.
think
It's an arbitrary figure, regardless of whichever way you do, and I think over a period of time, it would. How will you have people who are able to do high-risk buildings but not able to? Well, I don't see how that works. I think it will be just everything eventually.
Yeah. So, sir.
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
My name's Alex. I work for John Sisk as an engineer, but I'm here also as somebody who has fallen foul of this. So we just got a bill of £200,000 on a £235,000 flat, which hopefully some of it will be covered by Building Safety Fund, but obviously not all of it. This is the question that goes beyond cladding, so possibly for you, David. How much do you think that cladding has become shorthand for a bigger crisis? And do you think that there should be more attention on non-cladding related items? Because that's what we seem to be paying for and what seems to be outside of the funding.
I'm in the same position as you, with compartmentation and a warranty that isn't a warranty. I think it has become shorthand, and that's all people understand. They just talk about cladding, but it's about the way we build. For many, many years before Grenfell, I stood on stands and said the energy performance gap is a tell, because I think at the time, and I think it's not pretty true still, the average building used about 200% more energy than the design intent. which is a staggering figure. If it were only half of that, if it were a quarter of that, it's still a staggering figure. And you've got to look at it and say, well, the holes that the energy is getting out are the holes that the fire and smoke will get through. So if the energy is out, then probably everything is out by a degree. And the way I think we get to that 200% is everybody breaks spec by 1 or 2%. The stuff you don't notice. It's the screws that are different from the ones that were tested in the system. You change a pump for something else, you do a little bit. So everybody breaks spec by 1 to 2%, and eventually you get to your 200% in that sense. So it's incremental change, incrementally little. That's why I talked about we install products. We install products in isolation and don't take into account that a building is a product. It's an entire holistic integrated system that needs to work as a system. But as far as the shorthand, cladding is definitely shorthand for any number of issues. And I think the number of buildings impacted by that are therefore much, much higher than actually currently recorded.
Thank you. So yeah, my name's Sebastian Chukas. I work for Rockwall as a project specification manager, so quite close to your industry, guys. One area I was going to mention, it's not really about cladding, but when in my line of work, I see it as a bit of an elephant in the room more than anything. It's the roof of a building, which is another part of the envelope, which could be considered, and is also written into regulation as the same requirement really when it comes to spread of fire and safety. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were really on. I mean, the microscope is currently on the walls, but do you see it maybe moving next to the roofs being non-combustible as well?
Yeah, the insulation generally used on a roof is different to the walls. It certainly changed over the years. At one time it was phenolic and it was PUR and PIR. That's all changed now. So yeah, it will definitely transfer to the roof as well. But I don't think the roof was ever as vulnerable as the walls, because the spread of flame up the cavity caused Grenfell. So I think the roof is certainly an issue when it needs to be non-combustible materials, without doubt. But I don't think the transfer of fire is as dangerous on the roof as it is on the walls.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we look, this might not even consider sort of tall buildings, but maybe large buildings such as warehouses, etc., where you had the Ocado fire, which was a massive fire in Andover, where the entire warehouse essentially was wiped out because of failure of compartmentation and obviously the roof spread of fire. So some of these buildings might not be tall, but they're large buildings, and I mean, regulations still allow even tall buildings to use Euroclass E insulation on them, which to me just doesn't make sense. It feels as if that part of the envelope is well behind as to where walls are. So.
I think we could, just one last one from anybody before we go. Just one more and then we'll continue afterwards. Sir.
Afternoon, gents. My name's Lewis. I work for a company called Metal Line, and we actually manufacture A1 non-combustible cladding, as you probably know. My question is, you said there's over 2,000 buildings that obviously need remediation. That is at over 18 metres, because obviously there's a lot more over 11 metres in all of the UK. How long do you think it's going to take, and what is the solution in the meantime to protecting residents?
I think all they're doing at the moment is the walking watch, which the residents are having to pay for, which is, in my opinion, is scandalous. We've actually stripped off some buildings because the cladding is so detrimental, really. So they've been stripped off ready for the new system, but the new systems haven't come through, or the funding hasn't come through. I've only been quoted that 2,000 buildings. I don't know how that relates to 10 metres above or 18 metres above, to be honest.
I was talking to the Scottish Government last week, and they've got 10 to 11,000 buildings that are over 11 metres that all need remediating.
Oh, right.
So in the UK, there's going to be tens of thousands of buildings there.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing. And then if you were to factor into that, say, for example, what's just been said about anything above 10 metres, the multiplication factor is enormous, absolutely enormous. So we've only just begun on this one. I think, what's the fund at the moment? 5.1 billion. Myself and my colleagues sit on the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, I know it's now called something different, but please, it's difficult enough as it is. The Remediation Committee. Now, they've had thousands of applications for this, as you'd expect, and so far 26 have been approved. So you can see why John says that there are buildings out there that have stood for 2 years or more, waiting for something to happen. The money's there, but the system seems to gum it up. And I know this is a forum where you ask me questions. I'm sorry, Adrian, you're probably looking at your watch. But let me ask you a question. In fact, I already asked it on the video. So what happens if you've got a clad building where the materials involved are A-class and it's indisputable, but the insulation, and I welcome Rockwell's involvement in this one, because they are the only ones that come out of the insulation market with any honour. You know, what's going to happen when the cladding is fine, but the material behind it, the insulation, has got to go? It's like the old Alice Cooper song, isn't it? He goes to the dentist, and his teeth are fine, but his gums have got to go. So, you know, I don't want to make light of this thing, but there's a lot of questions to be asked. And it isn't just down to the external cladding, not by any manner of means. And once that inquiry moves on to the next phase, which is the criminal phase, then I think certain watchdogs are going to be unleashed, and there'll be more freedom to manoeuvre. But, you know, this whole cladding process, this whole cladding disaster, the ball has only just started rolling.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, Peter. Can you sing us that Alice Cooper song?
Only in 5 minutes' time if you're going to the Beard Festival. Peter will, I'm sure, will give us a rendition of it. But joking apart, I'd like to thank everybody today. I'd like to thank our panellists for answering some questions. I'm sure there are others to be said and had. Please go to the Beer Festival. We may be able to answer some more there. But I'd like to thank everybody involved today, and particularly VIVALDA for funding this film. I think it's been fascinating, and hopefully we'll be able to continue this debate at another time. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you. Oh, that's all right.